This video is sponsored by MPB. Well, they were some photos from our trip up to Svalbard a number of weeks back. It was a fantastic trip. There were about 40 of us involved in this workshop that we were running on the Greg Mortimer, which is the same ship that we're going to Antarctica on in 2026 if you're interested. And the plan for this video was basically to put together a vlog of that trip because we had a great time. Sadly, my wildlife videography has not improved since the last time I was in Svalbard last year. And so I had a choice. I thought I could either subject you to immediate motion sickness, or perhaps we could talk about something else. I decided to talk about something else, but I will pepper this video with photos from that trip, otherwise you'll get bored of my face. But there's something else that I want to talk about, is my photography mantras. I have two photography mantras. You'll be familiar with one of them if you've followed this channel for a while, and that is that I want to take photos about things rather than of things. I'm constantly thinking about that while I'm taking photos. As I've said, I've mentioned that in numerous videos. Perhaps I'll try and package that message into one video where I go into it in detail. But today what I want to do is talk about the other photography mantra that I have, which I call thin glass. And I'll be honest, you will need to bear with me for this. So, since I became a parent, I have developed a fear of heights, which might be a bit strange. I don't know if anybody else has found that since becoming a parent. But in that time, I've been up a number of skyscrapers, and I don't know if you have been on one of those walkways or platforms where you can basically stand on glass and look down on a city 100 floors down, or whatever it is. And the point of them, I think, is to make most people scared, particularly people like me who have a fear of heights. I have found, though, that they have no effect on me whatsoever. And since going on those platforms, I've thought a lot about why that is. And I suppose the answer is obvious. It's the glass. It's the really thick glass that you're stood on, and the knowledge that that glass can absolutely support your weight, and it completely changes the experience versus, I don't know, holding a bit of string up above a city. That would feel quite different. Anyway, that's a very long way of saying I have come to appreciate the power of glass. Now, as photographers, we know all about the power of glass. If, for instance, you use ND filters in your work to blur skies or blur water, you'll be well aware of the power of glass. It's a similar story if you use polarizers to remove glare or to bring out color and contrast. Likewise, if you use very wide angle lenses, you'll know all about the power of glass. Or if you use very long lenses, then you'll have seen lots of examples of apparent compression. And in short, there are lots of magical ways that we can use glass as photographers to manipulate our scenes in some way. Anyway, over the past number of years, I have realised that what I want to do as a photographer is to try and remove the impact of glass as much as possible. And basically what I'm looking for with my photography is to take photos of places in such a way that it looks like you could have happened across those scenes if you were just out for a walk. And that means I try and do a number of things, and I thought in this video I could talk about what I try and do to make that happen. Tell you what, let's look at some photos from Longyearbyen, the town in Svalbard. I was there before we got on the ship, and I had a great time just walking around the buildings. I did that last year as well, you might have seen in a video. But let's have a look at some of those photos, and then we can come back to these points about thin glass. So the first photography mantra that I have, taking photos about things rather than of things, that kind of informs what it is that I want to shoot, which essentially is Human Nature, my new book. This is the first proof I have of this book. It came this morning, and when this video comes out, I think I'll only have 1 or 2 days to wait until I get all of the books delivered, hopefully. But yeah, if you're new to my channel, basically I love to photograph man-made things within nature, and we can talk about that another time. That's what I like to shoot. Thin glass informs how I like to shoot those things. And as I say, the name of the game, for me at least, is to take photos in such a way that it looks like you could have just happened across those scenes on a walk. Now there are a number of ways I try and achieve this. Probably the one that does the heaviest lifting is focal length choice, which I've spoken about an awful lot on this channel, and I will speak about entirely in next week's video. So sort of park that to one side, I'll talk about it in next week's video, but you'll know if you watch this channel that I shoot pretty much exclusively these days between 40 and 50 millimeters, unless I'm taking photos of a polar bear. Because if I'm taking photos of a polar bear at 40 to 50 millimeters, it's either going to look very small in my frame or I'm about to die. But yes, Emily has approved pizza for tea. But yeah, outside of polar bears, 40 to 50 millimeters is where I live. As I say, I'll get onto that more next week. It's got to do with how the human eye sees the world, which is quite a complicated subject, to be honest. We'll talk about that next week. So number 1 or number 2 after focal lengths is that I try actively to shoot at all times of day, because we experience the world at all times of day. We don't only go out in golden hour, for instance. So by trying to show the world as we see it, it stands to reason that I need to go out at all times and in all kinds of conditions and light. And so I love golden hour as much as the next person, but I try and make sure that my photography covers lots of different conditions. The next thing that I try and do is to shoot at, I guess what I'd call medium apertures, anywhere between sort of f5 and f8, rather than, for instance, f16. If you were to look at your finger like this, which looks a bit weird, but you can do it, you'll notice if you focus on your finger that the stuff in the background is not quite sharp. That is to say that the natural way of seeing the world is not focus stacked, basically. Some things are sharper or more in focus than others, and therefore I try and shoot at apertures that allow for softness either in the foreground or in the background, depending on what is important in the scene. The added bonus of that is that I can pretty much always shoot handheld, because I'm not shooting at f16 or even more close than that, which means I'm letting enough light hit my sensor that I can shoot at reasonable shutter speeds. But also, I can typically shoot at the apertures that are sharpest and best performing on most of the lenses that I use. So those are the apertures that I typically use the most. What else do I do? Oh yeah, I typically shoot pretty much all of my photos at head height. Head height is one of those completely meaningless phrases because it depends how high you put your head. But stood up, basically, is how I take the vast majority of my photos. And the reason I do that is because I think we mostly experience the world from that kind of height, that distance from the floor. One of my favourite things to do is to go on a double-decker bus in a city, because you get a completely different perspective. But when it comes to shooting and my style of photography, I like to be shot stood up rather than having my camera really close to the floor for puddle shots or reflection shots or whatever. Because again, I am trying to replicate the world in the way we most often see it. And outside of that, and I've spoken about these things before, but I'm looking for scenes that make me ask questions, things that make me curious. That is what dictates what I end up taking photos of these days. And again, that's more to do with photos about things than of things. But between those two things, those two mantras, that informs when I press the shutter, basically. And as much as I like taking photos of polar bears with a 400mm lens, day to day, my goal is to be taking photos of things that, I don't know, are a bit more everyday, I suppose. And to that end, I have sold all my telephoto lenses, which initially I thought was quite a bold step, until I realised that outside of taking my telephoto to Svalbard, I hadn't shot with it in maybe at least 2 years. Definitely at least 2 years. And the more time goes on, the more committed I feel to this idea of 40 to 50 millimeters, normal, natural looking stuff. And I absolutely edit my photos a bit. Sometimes I'll brighten the skies, sometimes I'll bring out some of the colours. But my aim, whether or not I achieve this, I don't know, you can tell me. But my aim is to always put out photos that look natural, or like you could have experienced them in that way. And sometimes if people are watching my videos and they don't particularly like my photos and they feel compelled to tell me that they don't like my photos, what they might say is, oh, you're just a snapshot photographer. And I think in lots of cases that's because I'm not setting up with a tripod and taking lots of time to consider what filters I might use, how I need to focus stack, how I need to exposure bracket, all that. I'm not really considering any of that stuff. And a lot of the time I'm not showing in my videos all my considerations that go into photos. But that doesn't mean they're not considered. And as much as I try not to take myself seriously, I do take the photos very seriously. It's just that I maybe tend to work a bit quicker than some other people on YouTube. For better or worse. You might just not like my photos, that's fine. But yeah, they are considered. And for example, me always taking photos at head height pretty much exclusively is very, very intentional. As you'll see if you decide to buy a copy of Human Nature, my book. Yeah, that's enough of a plug, I think. But talking of plugs, a huge thank you to the sponsor of this week's video, MPB. And I'll be honest, the aim of the game in this little sponsored section was to have footage of me packing up my telephoto lenses into a box ready to send to MPB. Unfortunately, I was sat here editing photos when there was a knock on the door. Turned out it was the courier from MPB coming to collect the stuff, and I hadn't packed it away yet. And so he was very kind. He waited a good few minutes while I carefully put things into a box, but it did mean I didn't have time to film that process. Would have been good for now. In any case, MPB, as far as I'm concerned, is the best place to sell your photography kit. It's completely hassle-free. You basically get a quote online. If you're happy with that quote, MPB will arrange for a courier to come to your house to collect the gear. When it gets to MPB, they will carefully assess it and confirm your quote, and then you'll be paid very promptly. It's fantastic and takes away all the headaches of negotiation, sorting out couriers yourself, insurance, questions, disputes. All the hassles of selling are just gone when you use MPB. And it's also an absolutely fantastic place to buy used kit online. And you can save hundreds, if not thousands, and I certainly have over the years, by buying used. And by buying with MPB, you get a 6-month warranty when you do, and you can buy the stuff safe in the knowledge that it's all been assessed by professionals before being put on the site. So if you're looking to add to your kit or reduce your kit, free up some money for some photography trips and such, then definitely check out MPB. And you can do so in the links in my description. Then a huge thank you to MPB for their continued support of this channel. And next time I'm selling on MPB, I shall make sure to film me putting the stuff in a box. That would be useful. Anyway, hopefully this video was interesting or helpful, or both, and I'll see you next time when, once again, we'll be talking about focal lengths. See you then.